The day the stones fell silent. The stones were already in their hands. That is the thing no one talks about afterward, not the accusation, not the verdict, but the stones. Already chosen. Already lifted. Already warm from being held too long. The decision had been made before anyone said a word. The crowd had simply been waiting for permission. Miriam stood in her doorway and looked at the stones and felt something leave her body, not courage, but the thing beneath courage, the thing that had been keeping her standing since her husband died 6 months ago. She felt its absence as a physical sensation. A sudden weightlessness that was not relief. She pulled her daughter closer. Hannah was 6 months old, round-faced and quiet. She did not cry. She looked at the crowd with her serious dark eyes, the eyes that had been watching and noting since the day she was born, and she was still. The man who had done this was standing slightly behind the elders. His name was Dayton. Merchant. Prosperous. The kind of man who stood at the front of the synagogue and was seen to stand there. He had come to Miriam's door 8 weeks after her husband Yosef died, had come with a respectful expression and words chosen carefully, and an offer that was not, underneath its careful words, respectful at all. She had closed the door. He had stood outside it for a long moment. In the silence of that moment something shifted in him, not rage, not immediately, but something colder and more deliberate. He was a man who had built his entire life on the understanding that the world arranged itself according to his position in it. He was respected. He was prosperous. He was, by every measure available to him, a man to whom things were not refused. She had closed the door. He told himself, walking away, that it did not matter. He told himself this for 3 weeks. He told himself this with increasing effort, the way you push against something that keeps pushing back, until one evening he understood that it did matter, that it had burrowed into him, that the closed door had become a splinter he could not reach. He told his neighbor he had seen a man leaving her house at dusk. He had seen no such thing. But the telling of it, the words leaving his mouth and entering the world and becoming a thing that existed outside him, produced a sensation he recognized, distantly, as relief. As if the closed door had been pushing against him for weeks and he had finally found a way to push back. He did not examine this too closely. Men like Dayton rarely do. The accusation moved through the village the way such things move, fast, and gathering, and changing shape as it traveled. By the time it reached the elders it had acquired detail and witness and the particular density of a story that has been told many times. Miriam heard it from her neighbor Rachel, who came to warn her, who held both her hands and said, "I'm sorry," in a voice that meant, "I believe you, and it doesn't matter." That night she sat on the floor of her house with Hannah in her lap and tried to build arguments. She was innocent. She could prove she was innocent. Benjamin, her father-in-law, could account for every visitor. There had been no one else, but the arguments felt thin. She knew what happened to women and accusations. The architecture of proof ran in one direction only. Benjamin was an old man, careful and quiet, who had believed in Jesus since the hillside at Capernaum. He had come home from that day changed in some way he could not fully explain, something in how the teacher had spoken about the poor, the grieving, the ones the world had arranged itself against. He looks at people, Benjamin had told Joseph once, as if they have not yet been decided. He had tried to bring Joseph to see the teacher. Joseph had smiled and said maybe next season. There was no next season. Now Benjamin stood at the edge of the crowd with his face the color of ash, trying to push forward, held back by two men, his mouth moving in words Miriam could not hear. The stones were warm in their hands. Hannah looked at the crowd. She had always been this way. Rachel had noticed it when Hannah was 10 days old. She watches, she had said, like she's trying to understand something. Benjamin had laughed and said all babies watched. Rachel had looked at Hannah again and said, quietly, not like this. It was true that she was unusually still in crowds. Most infants were agitated by noise and motion. Hannah grew more focused. Her eyes moved slowly and deliberately from face to face, as if she was not merely seeing but filing. Recording. Waiting. Benjamin, who watched her often, had thought sometimes that she looked less like an infant absorbing the world and more like someone who already knew something about it. He had not said this aloud. It was not the kind of thing you said aloud. But he had thought it. Miriam did not hear Jesus arrive. She was looking at the stones, cataloging them the way you catalog the thing that is going to happen to you, making it real, making it finite. And then the sound of the crowd changed. The momentum faltered. The current of 100 people moving toward a single point hesitated, broke, redirected. The crowd parted. He walked through it without hurry, without drama. Simply present the way a lamp is present in a room, not announcing itself but changing the quality of everything. He looked at Miriam. She understood, in that moment, what Benjamin had spent months trying to describe. He looked at her not through the accusation or past it or in spite of it. He looked at her directly, the person, the woman, the mother, the thing that existed before this crowd arrived and before Joseph died and before any of it. As if all of that was weather, and she was the ground underneath. She did not look away. He turned to the crowd. He listened to Dayton's account, careful, rehearsed, the precise architecture of something false constructed to withstand examination. His face was still throughout. When Dayton finished, the silence lasted long enough that the certainty in Dayton's posture developed small, visible fractures. Then Jesus stepped forward. Not toward Dayton. Not toward the elders. Toward Hannah. The child reached for him before he was close enough to reach. Both arms, fully extended, not the vague reaching of an infant toward light or movement, but deliberate. Specific. The way she reached for Benjamin. The way she reached for her mother. Something moved across Jesus's face. He took her hand, just her small hand, in his and crouched so that he was level with her, and he looked at her with an expression that was not the expression of a man looking at an infant. It was something quieter. Something that looked, from the outside, like listening. The crowd had gone completely still. Hannah looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned to her mother, and she spoke. The voice that came from her was wrong for her age. Not wrong in the way of something broken, wrong in the way of something that should not yet exist but did. Clear. Formed. Arriving with the patience of words that have been waiting for the right moment. He did not come. Her Aramaic precise and clean. The man they say came. He did not come. She was alone. She is always alone. I was there. No one moved. Hannah turned her face toward Dayton. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. In the silence of that crowd, a whisper would have carried to the far edge. He wanted her, she said. She said no. So he made the story. 7 words. Landing in the silence like 7 stones in still water, the ripples going out and out. Then she turned back to Jesus, and her face softened the way a child's face softens when it encounters something it recognizes without having a name for. My Father is with you, she said. Quieter now. Almost private. He sees you. He told me to tell my mother he sees her too. A pause. He is not afraid. The first stone fell from a man named Ezra, who had known Miriam's mother and had held Miriam as an infant and had come here this morning with the stone in his hand and the absolute conviction that he was doing what was right and necessary. The stone fell from his hand and he did not pick it up. He stood looking at his empty hand as if he did not recognize it. Then the woman beside him began to weep. Not quietly. The rough, uncontrolled weeping of someone whose grief has been waiting for a small opening. A man near the back of the crowd sat down in the dust. Simply sat down, his legs giving out beneath him, his hands pressed flat on the ground as if he needed to feel something solid. Someone said God, just the word, alone, not as profanity or prayer but as the only available response. Dayton was gone. No one saw him leave, he was there, and then the space he had occupied was empty, and no one moved to fill it, as if the space itself had become something they did not want to stand in. The stones lay in the dust. Benjamin had stopped trying to push through the crowd. He was standing very still with his hands at his sides and his eyes on his granddaughter, who had returned to her ordinary occupation of watching the world, her serious gaze moving from face to face, as if the last 2 minutes had simply been another thing worth observing. Jesus stood. He looked at Miriam. Your daughter has spoken, he said. And your husband's faith reached further than he knew faith often does. He paused. Go home. He believed, Miriam said. Her voice was barely there. He always wanted to see you. He never. He believed, Jesus said again, simply. That was enough. That is always enough. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she looked at Hannah, her 6-month daughter, already back to her normal quiet watchfulness, already apparently unaware that anything unusual had occurred. She looked at the empty hands around her. She went home. That evening Miriam sat on the floor of her house with Hannah asleep in her arms. "He is not afraid." She held the words the way you hold water in cupped hands, carefully, knowing they would not stay forever, trying to carry as much as possible. Outside, the village made its ordinary sounds. Inside, her daughter breathed. Her husband was not afraid. She pressed her face into her daughter's hair and held what she had been given and let the night come. It was enough.